The Association of African Universities, AAU, Africa's apex higher education organization, invites stakeholders to its 15th quadrennial General Conference from 5th to the 8th of July 2021. The theme is the future of African higher education. The conference will be held virtually and hosted by the Government of Ghana under 6 sub-themes as follows. Sub-theme 1, the future of African higher education post-COVID-19. Sub-theme 2, contributions of African higher education institutions to addressing the challenges linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. Sub-theme 3, contributions of African higher education institutions in achieving sustainable development goals. Sub-theme 4, funding of African higher education institutions in the face of unpredictable economy. Sub-theme 5, mainstreaming e-learning and the digital divide. Sub-theme 6, contributions of the diaspora to African higher education. Expected participants include ministries of higher education, academics, researchers and research organizations, regional economic communities, regional educational bodies like IUCEA, CAMES, and SARUWA, the organized private sector and captains of industry, development partners and other education stakeholders. The AAU's 15th Quadrennial General Conference is here. To register, kindly go to the link below, and for further enquiries, please visit the website www.event.aau.org/GenCon or send an email to secgen@aau.org and copy info@aau.org. AAU, the voice of higher education in Africa.
L'Association des universités africaines, AUA, l'organisation faîtière de l'enseignement supérieur en Afrique, invite toutes les parties prenantes à sa 15e conférence générale quadriennale qui se tiendra du 5 au 8 juillet 2021. Le thème de cette conférence est l'avenir de l'enseignement supérieur africain. La conférence se tiendra virtuellement et se sera accueillie par le gouvernement du Ghana. Elle comprend les 6 sous-thèmes principaux suivants. Sous-thème 1, l'avenir de l'enseignement supérieur africain après la COVID-19. Sous-thème 2, contribution des établissements d'enseignement supérieur africains pour le relevé des défis liés à la pandémie COVID-19. Sous-thème 3, contribution des établissements d'enseignement supérieur africains à la réalisation des objectifs de développement durable. Sous-thème 4, financement des établissements d'enseignement supérieur africains face à une économie imprévisible. Sous-thème 5, intégration de l'apprentissage en ligne et de la fracture numérique. Sous-thème 6, contribution de la diaspora à l'enseignement supérieur africain. Les participants attendus comprenant entre autres les ministères de l'enseignement supérieur, des universitaires, les chercheurs et organismes de recherche en Afrique et au-delà, les organismes éducatifs régionaux comme la IUCEA, la CAMES, la SARUWA, le secteur privé organisé et les chefs d'industrie, les partenaires de développement, agences et organisations internationales et d'autres acteurs de l'éducation. La 15e conférence générale quadriennale de l'AUA est là. Pour vous inscrire et participer, veuillez visiter la tinyurl.com/AAUGC 2021 et pour plus d'informations sur la conférence, veuillez visiter le site web event.aau.org/GenCon ou envoyer un courriel à secgen@aau.org et copier info@aau.org. L'AUA, la voie de l'enseignement supérieur en Afrique.
Once again, a warm welcome to this second day of our summit, which has been dubbed Righting the Wrongs of Doing Business in Africa. A special welcome from me. My name is Sam Ndoga, coming to you from Johannesburg, and you will see that a number of us are from different parts of Africa and different parts of the world. We have come together because we are purely concerned with seeing changes on this continent, given that our day's topic will really focus on paradigm shifts for sustainable transformation and development. We want to welcome you to the fact that a paradigm by nature is really about a shift in perspective, a shift in a set of ideas, a way of looking at something. In this case, we're really thinking about ways in which we can look at Africa as a continent and how we can begin to drive things in a complete different direction, hence the phrase paradigm shift. So feel welcome, Your Excellencies, Your Honorables, ladies and gentlemen, feel welcome to this platform. And just saving on time, we would like to say all protocol observed. We will only introduce our speakers from this point onwards, so everybody else just feel welcome and part and parcel of this really magnanimous occasion that we have to really interact around this sumptuous subject that we have been elated to dialogue around today. So without further ado, I would like to warmly welcome our moderator, Eddie, who will be shortly introducing our speakers for the first session. And thereafter, you will then move into a panel discussion in the second session. A little later on, I'll be welcoming our second moderator for that. So feel welcome, everybody. We are so thrilled you are here, and we trust that you'll find this really an engaging exercise. So feel very welcome. Over to you, Eddie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sam. Good day to everyone, all our distinguished participants here today. On this second day of the Africa Private Sector Summit for 2021, I want to welcome everyone, Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, representatives of the private sector all over the continent, intergovernmental organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and everyone who has deemed fit to join us here today. You are all welcome. My name is Oladipo Johnson, or to good friends like Dr. Sam, Eddie. I'm the technical advisor and focal point on the AFCFTA for the Coalition for Dialogue on Africa, which is also known as CODA. And for us at CODA, the AFCFTA is one of the foremost agendas that is essential to achieving Africa's developmental goals. That is why we've continually worked to seek its successful implementation by supporting summits such as this one, which drive the private sector and see the private sector's commitment to its implementation, but also by facilitating the involvement of the private sector through the African Business Council. And so we hope that this summit will bring more people in, more stakeholders on board as necessary, and begin the growth of the work we need to do together as a continental group. With that in mind, I want to begin by inviting the rapporteur. I understand they have short remarks regarding the outcomes from the first day, which took place yesterday. And so I want to invite the rapporteur for the meeting to please come forward with the brief outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnson, for the opportunity. My name is Kwesi Sam, and may I ask for your permission not to put on my camera for the purposes of my internet connectivity. Briefly, I'm just going to give a short overview of what happened during yesterday's session. So the summit began some few minutes after 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Accra, Ghana, and some part of the world. With an opening comment from Sam Ndoga. He gave a very good overview of the summit proceedings and also took advantage of the opportunity, or seized the opportunity of the occasion, to also wish our wonderful women a happy International Women's Day as the summit began on the day of International Women's Day. He also acknowledged the various contributions and significant contributions of women in advancing the progress of our dear continent. The moderator for the session, His Excellency Ambassador Abraham Rasool, also continued the proceedings by giving a brief remarks and invited the Secretary General of AAU, Professor Etienne Ahile, to also share a brief welcome remarks with all participants. But interestingly, in the account of the brief remarks that His Excellency Ambassador gave, he recounted his 10-year experience in the United States as the ambassador for South Africa, where he formed a great union with all African ambassadors. And at the time, the McKinsey report highlighted the great promise of Africa, which spoke about Africa's resources, our land, our growth rate, prospects, and range of opportunities that was awaiting Africa. And certainly, Africa had a plan with accountability, which was within the purview of the peer review mechanism, and the growing democracy and also human rights issues were set right on the continent. However, the setback at the time was that Africa did not necessarily sort out the ease of doing business and the role of the private sector in driving the renaissance of the continent. So it was very much important that after 10 years, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, which shows a great sign of institutional robustness. And only it was so important that as such a gathering like the summit, we needed to define the role of the private sector and what role strategically they will play in the implementation of the ASCFTA, especially within the period of the coronavirus pandemic. Professor Etienne Ahile, the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities, in his address also pledged the support of African universities to the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And he highlighted the need for a concerted effort of all stakeholders on the continent to ensure that we did not fail this time around with the implementation of this policy, and always also going beyond the assumption that our political leaders have all the solution to solve our African problems. He, however, also acknowledged the multidisciplinary nature of the resource persons for the summit, and also hoped that there will be a quality outcome in terms of the dialogue process and develop practical steps on how to trade among ourselves as a continent and how higher education will play a role in the implementation of the AFCTA. He ended his remark by reiterating the words of the first president of the Republic of Ghana, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, on the 24th of May, 1963, at the foundation summit of the OAU in Addis Ababa, which gave a very beautiful premise for the entire summit to begin. We also had a welcome address by Mr. Yusuf Dawele. He is the president of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. He encouraged summit participants to explore how the AFCTA will help achieve sustainable development in Africa, economic development, ensuring gender equity, and total development within its member states. He also stressed the need to invest in fundamental principle of gender equity and gender balance, and making sure that we foster academia, private sector, and public sector collaboration in the achievement of the Continental Free Trade Area in terms of its implementation. We were privileged to have a keynote address by the President of Niger, His Excellency Mr. Mamadou Issoufou, and that was delivered on his behalf by the Secretary of Cabinet. He also seized the opportunity to wish women across the continent and across the globe a happy International Women's Day, and also used the opportunity to inform participants that the President of Niger received the Mo Ibrahim Prize of Good Leadership and Governance in 2020. He highlighted economic and social transformation of Niger's economy, and as one of the African Union's champion for the implementation of the CFTA, he expressed his deepest appreciation to all strategic partners for the support for organizing this beautiful summit as well. He emphasized that Africa has more than enough attributes and potential that is not yet explored at the moment, and urged the summit to harness ways the private sector can work collaboratively with the public sector with mutual respect to achieve the development we want as a continent within implementation of the CFTA. We had several key messages. We were privileged to have Mr. Benjamin Achampon delivering the message of the Secretary General of AFTA, Secretariat, who couldn't join us because of some other conflicting messages. But in the interest of time, I would want to proceed to give some few highlights of other messages that came. Dr. Amani stressed three wonderful or key pillars that was a great food for thought for the summit. She mentioned that the private sector, we needed to build the capacity of the private sector and its people, especially women and small-scale businesses and enterprises, to be able to manage our own resources as a continent. There was also the need for policy to empower or to guide trade on the continent, and propose that 50% of government procurement on the continent must go to African businesses and private sector, and they need to also ensure that there is some sort of unity and harmony among private sector and players on the continent to achieve the Africa we want. She outlined the need also again for academia and private sector to work collaboratively in this regard. Caroline Gatti from the Organization of Women in International Trade, based in Nairobi, highlighted the challenges women face in doing business or trade in Africa. She mentioned that Africa does more business with the US and UK and not really among ourselves. She raised key issues of trust as very important in doing business, issues of funding, of finding customers, and surmounting logistical challenges are very important in this summit. Importantly, she mentioned that there must be a strategic effort to increase women participation in trade on the continent by removing barriers that limit women's involvement in trade on the continent. Key message also that came from Professor Joshua Abon from the University of Ghana Business School also highlighted the benefits and overarching goal of the CFTA and the need to remove all non-trade barriers within the sub-region to enable or to be able to harness the full benefits of AFTA. Implementation of AFTA does not really operate in vacuum, he mentioned, and then also highlighted issues of intellectual property right as very key in doing business, not only among ourselves as a continent and also globally as well. There were key contributions from participants, and my time is almost up, but I would want to use this opportunity to highlight 7 of the key contributions that came from participants and that I think is very much important for us to look at as we begin the second day. The need to harmonize customs and tariff across the continent, the need to promote research and own our own data as Africans and not always resorting to World Bank and other international players for data concerning Africans. The need to deal with issues of corruption, which is a major bane to our development in terms of trade and business on the continent, have an efficient banking system across the continent, address the issue of information among language divide. As we already know, the African continent has more than 4 or 5 language divide, and so it is important that in doing business among ourselves in terms of information dissemination, we look at issues concerning covering everyone in terms of language divide, let me put it that way, and also the need to build a robust structure to create economic intelligence units across the continent. And finally, the private sector must consciously invest in research and knowledge management and also collaborate with higher education in that regard. The summit came to a close with a closing message, and we had 170 participants who stayed to the end of the summit. Thank you very much. This is a brief overview of what happened yesterday. We may have not reported on all the messages that were shared by distinguished guests and speakers, but at the end of the summit, we'll provide a full report that gives the details of everything that happened yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sam. Wonderful job on getting all the outcomes from yesterday. I think you covered pretty much everything ably, particularly the importance of encouraging and supporting development of SMEs, as well as women and youth entrepreneurs under the AFCFTA. We'll look forward to the final report when all of this is done. But in the meantime, I want to take this opportunity again to welcome everyone. So far, we have about 208 participants who are online, and the numbers are still growing. Hopefully, we end today with a lot more than we did yesterday. It's a bit shorter, so that should help as well. I want to remind everyone that we have interpretation for all 4 languages of the African Union. That's Arabic, French, and Portuguese and English. Please take note of the button at the bottom of your screen. If you have any issues with it, please contact us via the chat. We are always available to assist. Also, again, regarding the chat group, I noticed that people have already started using it. Thank you very much for that. Any introductions, questions, comments you may have, please feel free to use the chat as well as the chat on the WhatsApp group, which was created. A link has been sent already. You can find that in the chat group, but I'm sure my colleagues will be sharing it again later as we go on. Today's sessions will delve into investment paradigm shifts for sustainable transformation and development. And the end of it, we're hoping other outcomes, amongst which to get a better understanding of what new investment strategies would look under the AFCFTA, particularly in consideration of the existing foreign direct investments and new shifts brought on by the free trade agreement. We also expect to identify how African tertiary institutions can position themselves to produce the skill sets that are needed to drive Africa's transformation, again, under the AFCFTA. You will probably note already from the program that we have 3 speakers in this first session, all of whom are representatives of the Western region of the continent. For those of us who are not from West Africa, we know that West Africa is arguably the most integrated and vibrant when it comes to regional trade and economic collaboration on the continent. So, and this is very much thanks to the efforts of the member states within ECOWAS, as well as the regional bodies in that region. So this is clear from the trade of the region, which goes up to about 200 billion or over 200 billion from recent studies. And of course, West Africa, as we know, remains the EU's largest trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa. Despite all these realizations, though, there's an awareness that the total exports from the region still rely heavily on the extractive sector. Extractive products such as oil and diamonds and whatnot, and also a few agricultural commodities as well. And so we're hoping that with this in mind, the discussions today can help push the AFCFTA to enhance product diversity, not only from the region, but also throughout the whole continent, so that we can move beyond this reliance on the extractives and start to build other areas on the continent in our trade and our exports. On that note, I wish to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Mamadou Traore. Please forgive me if I've mispronounced the name. My French is not very good. He's the Distinguished Commissioner for Industry and Private Sector Promotion at ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. And he's here to deliver his opening remarks on today's sessions. With that in mind, Mr. Traore, you are most welcome to the summit. Please, if you are here, please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le modérateur, de me donner la parole dans le cadre de cette cérémonie introductive.
Mr. Moderator, thank you so much for giving me the floor, giving me an opportunity to participate in the discussions and debate this summit. Your Excellency, Mr. Minister of Trade, Industry and Investment of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mr. President of the West African Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, my dear brother from Eritrea, Your Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by thanking the organizers of this major virtual summit Thank you for having taken the initiative of opening up such a forum to all the business and private sector operators within the framework of AFCFTA doing business in Africa. I'd like to particularly say a welcome to the West African Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FOAC, to the ECA, to the Economic Commission. For having supported us, and I'd like to thank them for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this debate on investment paradigm shifts for sustainable transformation and development. The ECOWAS Commission, which I am representing here today, is honored and very pleased to be participating in this meeting. Our hope is that it will give us an opportunity to hear from various stakeholders, listen to their ideas, and together identify the new challenges facing the private sector when it comes to doing business in Africa in general and in the ECOWAS region in particular under the umbrella of the AFCFTA. This is a meeting which no doubt will give us an opportunity to have a quick overview of the various policies and strategies that are being implemented within the ECOWAS region. These are investment strategies. It will give us an opportunity to see how relevant they are and how efficient they can be. May I, therefore, seize this opportunity to welcome and greet, as well as to thank all those who are participating on this platform. They are showing us just how interested they are in the theme, the topic for today, investment paradigm shifts for sustainable transformation and development. Ladies and gentlemen, as we meet today, we are prepared to discuss investments. It's one of the aspects of economic policy that is recognized for being a lever for economic development and inclusive growth, which generates employment. Our meeting is within the framework of the African Free Trade Zone, within the framework of AFCFTA, and also against a backdrop of security issues plaguing the West African zone. So the issue that comes to mind for all of us is, what exactly can our states do? What does the region do to better mobilize investment funding, investment resources, so that the initiatives we have embarked upon will place our economies on this trajectory towards inclusive growth? Ladies and gentlemen, this is why ECOWAS in its 15 member states have already signed the African AFCFTA, and 12 have ratified this agreement. As you know, this community of 15 West African member states is expecting to promote regional integration amongst its member states so that we can set up an economic, customs, and monetary zone, which will improve the living standards of our populations and contribute to economic and social development, as well as policies to this end in our zone. The regional economies had grown since had grown on an average of 3.1%. And this growth has unfortunately in 2020 been reversed, as you know. This is attributable to the health crisis, 1.7% shrink, and this drop has been particularly caused by disruptions to the supply chains, and this has affected prices and availability. Ladies and gentlemen, we must remind you that before this crisis, the region was having difficulties mobilizing the 0.7% of international flows for supporting investments. And despite the multiple economic reforms that had been initiated by states, this was a difficulty. There were structural weaknesses that we observed here and there, and these structural weaknesses affect the quality and availability of some factors like what we observe in the Global Business Index and the ease of doing business indicators. These weaknesses were observed in the business environment, which is a very complex one in our region. And there was difficulty finding qualified labor in basic infrastructure areas, transport, energy, telecommunications. And all this has been a major factor that justifies why the ECOWAS Commission set up several programs. And let me mention the Regional Infrastructure Program. And there was a regional program for electricity interconnection. This was to organize electricity markets. There was a regional program for competitiveness, a regional program for financial market integration with two pillars to it, organizing payment systems within the region and also integrating capital markets. And this, to my mind, is a very important pillar when we think about how investment programs must be fostered, because it is a mechanism that will make it possible to support medium and long-term investments. We need these financial resources to support those investments. Ladies and gentlemen, these are initiatives that will overcome the general weaknesses facing investments, the lack of investments in our region. This crisis has led to deepening budgetary deficits, and we have to find alternative solutions within this environment so that we continue to fund investment programs from the social and economic perspective. Now, we recognize that with the entry into force of the AFCFTA since the 1st of June 2021, we are likely to spark new hope for investment promotion in a market that represents 1.2 billion inhabitants. Improvements to the ecosystem, efforts to improve the business ecosystem should really be visible if we want to benefit from these resources. And this should lead to wider areas of interest, like promoting investment through raising technical and non-technical barriers, policies for organizing competitiveness in the zone, strengthening human resources and development of qualified labor, developing physical infrastructure for better interconnectedness, and also for improved financial flows, public governance policies, and better enterprise support. So these are areas which are not exhaustive, but are elements that will contribute to truly integrating this AFCFTA. So efficiently implementing all these measures, we believe, will mean that we have to change certain values, which include investment promotion in our region. Let us admit, therefore, that the fiscal element of the abundance of natural resources, which states have often focused on, will not be the only determinants for attracting investments. I think we should admit that value chains can only be forged if we integrate innovation, if we are more resilient to increase our capacity, And that from a purely macroeconomic perspective, our states will have to adopt policies to foster stability on the macroeconomic plane. Now, with respect to the private sector and companies, I think from our perspective, we should help them have a better grasp of the situation, help them so that each and every one of them can react more nimbly. And we, in my opinion, should consider that this is an appeal. I would actually describe it as a wake-up call, particularly for economies in the region. This crisis is a wake-up call because we have to look at how we develop transformative industries. We have to transfer these resources for use at home rather than transferring them abroad. So this is a wake-up call where we will react to improve upon investment climates in our states. We must also remember that the most important change which investors and companies will embark upon will lead to increases in productivity, improve the quality of goods and services that are produced through promoting new developments in resilient technologies and innovative technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall conclude by reiterating my thanks in advance to all the speakers who on the panel will be guiding our discussion forward. These are speakers who agreed to be on the panel, agreed to share with us their experience in thinking through these areas of concern, and let us also listen carefully to their conclusions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention.
Merci.
Monsieur le Président Fama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chare, for your wonderful words,
Merci beaucoup.
for adequately setting up the tone for the day. With that in mind, I want to move on to the next speaker since we are running out of time. I would like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Farman Toure, to give his remarks. In addition to holding several prominent roles, Mr. Toure is currently the president of the Federation of Chambers of Commerce for ECOWAS, FEWATI, as well as the president of the Côte d'Ivoire Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We're very happy to have you join us here today, sir. Please, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, the Commissioner of ECOWAS responsible for industry and private sector promotion, Mr. Mamadou Traoré, the organizers of the summit, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Allow me to add my voice to that of His Excellency, Mr. Mamadou Traoré, Commissioner for Industry and Private Sector Promotion of ECOWAS, to welcome all of you to this summit. It is a historical event because it is taking place at the time that the African countries have decided to trade among themselves, and at a time when we are faced with COVID-19 pandemic that has resulted in various negative impacts on our economies and our social status. On behalf of the Federation of West African Chambers of Commerce and Industry and other chambers of commerce, I would like to make my address before you. Ladies and gentlemen, most African countries, especially those of the ECOWAS region, are seeking long-term investments through partnerships, joint ventures, as well as public-private partnerships to ensure that they attain economic growth and development. The realization of sustainable development goals focuses on investment as well as payment solutions and sustainable solutions that are at the core of the private sector and ECOWAS. This summit gives us the opportunity, both the public and the private sector, to deal with investment promotion policies as well as relevant opportunities. And at the same time, COVID-19 is teaching us how to be more resilient, to invest and transform resources. I am of the opinion that this summit that has been jointly organized by private sector organizations as well as public sector organizations and universities under the aegis of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa will increase the appetite of African entrepreneurs to directly or jointly invest with other private sector partners in public institutions with a view to having win-win partnerships for both parties for us to attain the AFCFTA objectives. I would like to particularly thank the ECOWAS Commission for having hosted the FEWASI Secretariat and for the unwavering support that you have been giving us. Following the instructions given by heads of state and government since 1999, we are playing our role as a public-private dialogue platform in West Africa. In FEWASI, we have the best experiences to share with other regions on investments in community enterprises such as ASCAI, EcoBank, and C-Link that we also initiated. The experience has been able to give us a chance to discuss with heads of state and government to talk about the challenges we face in investment. We are particularly proud of this unique opportunity that our federation has in West Africa. And for this, I would like to reiterate to the Commissioner for Industry and Private Sector Promotion a great thanks for his support. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of our meeting today is investment paradigm shifts for sustainable transformation and development. And it is very relevant and timely when we are discussing great changes in the global economy and countries' economies following the COVID-19 pandemic that is continuing to threaten lives and livelihoods with serious implications for economies. And yet we are moving to the second phase of negotiations of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This theme is really appropriate. Indeed, it is time for Africans, as we all know, to negotiate the protocol on investment. It is one of the key elements of the negotiations, and we should ensure that we have a protocol that promotes investment and contributes to the more trade in Africa, to boosting trade in Africa. We need to involve the private sector and key policymakers in developing an inclusive and a broad protocol, as we did in West Africa with ECOWAS when we had to draft and harmonize the investment promotion code. I believe that the policy adopted in West Africa will open doors for discussions at the continental level so that we develop an investment promotion that will boost intra-African trade and have a thriving market. FEWASI is ready to share experiences on investments with sister organizations in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude my remarks, I would like to sincerely thank His Excellency Mr. Mamadou Youssoufou, the President of Niger, the champion and leader of the AFCFTA, for the work that he has done and the sacrifice that he has made to open this summit officially. His Excellency Mamadou Buhari is also of Nigeria, has also been supporting us as we deal with the COVID-19 pandemic in West Africa. His Excellency Nana of Ghana has also been supporting the private sector through our federation. Moderator and Your Excellency, the Commissioner, I hope that we will have a chance to share the conclusions of the summit of the African Private Sector Summit. I'd like to thank the co-organizers of the summit, as Commissioner Mamadou Traoré did, for their remarkable efforts and their commitment to organize such an important meeting. I laud the presence of key economic operators, professionals, and all participants who are present at this summit. Our commitment to boosting intra-African trade is manifest. I hope that we will take the opportunity to have deliberations and make informed decisions so that we have continental integration that will be beneficial for all and will enable us to attain the necessary development for the Africa that we all want. Thank you very much.
J'en ai terminé. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toure, for these very vital remarks. We're very glad to hear of all the various avenues FEWASI is taking to engage heads of states in favor of providing an enabling environment for investment and sustainable developments. It goes very much hand in hand with the efforts of ECOWAS, which is to integrate innovation, support the private sector in the region, and ultimately in the continent, as outlined by Mr. Traoré in his remarks. Moving on swiftly to the final speaker of the session, I have been directed to inform all of you that although he wished he could have joined us, the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment for the Federal Republic of Nigeria could not be here. Unfortunately, he sends his regrets due to official commitments. He has, however, appointed in his place, and very ably, Mr. Francis Anatogu, who will be delivering the keynote address on his behalf for today. Mr. Anatogu, if you don't know, is a senior special assistant for the President of Nigeria on public sector matters. And he also operates as the Secretary of Nigeria's National Action Committee on the AFCFTA. Prior to this, he was the Secretary of the Presidential Committee on the Impact and Readiness Assessment of the AFCFTA. So in fact, if we have any questions about why Nigeria took its time to sign on to the AFCFTA, I think he's the one who can answer them for us. It's an honor to have you here today, Mr. Anatogu. Please go ahead, take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Minister sends his apologies for not being able to join us today. So I will be delivering his address, or his keynote address. So the Honorable Minister starts by wishing all women here present today a happy Women's Day, and thanks the organizers and panelists for putting this together. And the speech goes like this. I welcome all of you today to today's program of the Africa Private Sector Summit focused on investment paradigm shifts for sustainable transformation and development. Indeed, Africa has been undergoing disruptive innovation even before the advent of the AFCFTA. With AFCFTA, the tempo has been raised significantly. The opportunities have become more pronounced and the resolve of our people to succeed unmatched. Indeed, there is no better time to be an African or an African business. I'll use the perspective of Nigeria to provide the context we need as we consider the paradigm shifts that must happen as we implement AFCFTA. Between 2010 and 2014, the Nigerian economy was recognized as one of the fastest growing economies in the world as GDP grew steadily on the back of high oil prices. Unfortunately, when the oil price fell in 2014, our economy contracted and eventually slipped into a recession. With concerted efforts of government, we subsequently witnessed 11 quarters of consecutive GDP growth that saw our economy recover from the recession and GDP grow from 0.8% in 2017 to 2.6% in 2019. Unfortunately, the GDP growth declined in first quarter 2020, and by third quarter 2020, it has declined by as much as 3.6%, and we were in another recession. This time, the recession was because of the downward trend in global economic activities caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The good news is Nigeria's GDP growth is expected to have a modest pickup by the first and second quarters of 2021. The characteristics and potentials of political, institutional, social, and economic development in Nigeria are tied to crude oil price and its volatility in the international market. This affects government revenue, economic development, real wages, exchange rate, employment, production, and consumption. It also impacts capital investment. In the private sector, there is a general avoidance of long-term capital investment with private domestic capital tending to shun industrialization and going into speculative ventures. Producers, farmers, entrepreneurs, and wage earners are further impoverished, leading to mass suffering and shrinking consumption. All these challenges underscore the need for Nigeria to diversify her economy away from her dependence on oil and the need for structural transformation of Nigeria's pre-industrial economy to an industrially diverse. But the story is similar across African countries. So also is the resolve to do things differently. Given this imperative, one of the most important steps we've taken as a nation is the signing of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and the submission of our instrument of ratification in December 2020. The AFCFTA is expected to complement Nigeria's national development agenda and act as a catalyst for Nigeria's export diversification by providing preferential access for products and services to the huge African market, which currently sources over 85% of imports from outside the continent. It creates a single market in Africa with a size of 1.3 billion people and GDP of over $3.4 trillion. The AFCFTA is interesting because Africa demands finished products and Nigeria aspires to industrialize. And African countries as a whole aspire to progress beyond export of commodities. The AFCFTA includes the dispute settlement mechanism for dealing with predatory trade practices, including smuggling and dumping, which is very important to us in Nigeria. The mechanism for monitoring and reducing non-tariff barriers and discriminatory treatment is also very important. As with all other developmental initiatives, AFCFTA is without its challenges, both in terms of its implementation and its overall outcomes. On the long run, and to be able to take full advantage of the AFCFTA initiative, Africa would need to harmonize the monetary policies of member states. In the short term, there could be a threat to the survival of infant industries, but this will slowly disappear as smaller firms are incentivized to take up this challenge and scale up. We are aware that goods made in other continents could be disguised as made in Africa goods to qualify for duty-free treatment. However, we have already built in specific safeguards to mitigate this challenge. Indeed, paradigm shifts are required to attract investment for trade under AFCFTA. Some of these are critical not only for attracting investments, but also for successful realization of the goals of AFCFTA. The first shift has to be focused on implementation. A lot has been achieved so far, a lot is ongoing, but we still have a lot to do to operationalize the AFCFTA agreement. For instance, the rules of origin provisions must work as designed and efficiently too. Mutual recognition agreements must be in place for aids of trade in services. We must harmonize standards, policies, and regulation. Secondly, there is a full agreement that the AFCFTA has to be led by the private sector. For many, if not all African countries, this will require stakeholders across the spectrum to appraise their roles and responsibilities. Government needs to refocus on updating policies and regulations, and private sector needs to take on more responsibility for advocacy, information and data sharing, and other some forms of decision support. But we must also critically look at the root causes that impact enforcement. And we need to do this both at domestic level, but also at regional levels. Suffice to say that economics drives behaviors. So we must ensure that there are sufficient consideration and incentives to minimize undesired outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, in Nigeria, we have established the National Action Committee to implement the AFCFTA. And we are working with governments, development partners, and private sector to mobilize support for AFCFTA, showcase the opportunity, and help our people to take advantage of this unique opportunity. Our efforts are focused on implementing consistent and predictable policies to diversify economy and mitigate investor uncertainty. Investors can be rest assured that policies and reforms that have been implemented will align with our long-term goals. We welcome and will continue to welcome the support of private sector and all other strategic partners aligned with our vision of a more diversified economy. Let me end by thanking the organizers of this program for taking on this initiative and the panelists for accepting the invitation to participate. I thank you all for your time and for the opportunity to share Nigeria's perspective and initiatives on AFCFTA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Natogu, for that very comprehensive keynote address. We also want to thank His Excellency, the Honorable Minister. Even though he was not able to join us, we are glad that you were here to represent him ably. Personally, I'm very glad to hear that Nigeria is working to move beyond dependency on extractives. I think that is something that every country now on the continent is trying to move to as well. And particularly the willingness of the government to work with the private sector and enable them to be able to advance and grow within the country is also very, very welcome. We are glad that this is happening, and as we go on in the summit, we will hope to hear more from the other regions and see how much progress is being made on the continent as well. With that, we are near the end of our first session. I would wish to hand over to my eminent fellow moderator who will be guiding us through the second session of the day. Councillor Seward Cooper from Liberia. Some of you probably already know him. He's an international and corporate lawyer who served as a legal advisor to President Ellen Sirleaf Johnson of Liberia, and also as a member of the cabinet between 2011 and 2016. He has also served as the first head of the African Development Bank Group's Integrity and Anti-Corruption Office. And so suffice it to say, I think I'm leaving you all in good hands. Before Councillor Cooper takes over though, and carries you all into the next session, we are aware that yesterday was International Women's Day. And for us, as the organizing team of this summit, every day really is International Women's Day, because doing business right and properly implementing the AFCFTA means ensuring that women are always at the forefront of it all. And so we would like to share a short clip, well, somewhat short clip, with you celebrating women leaders in trade. And once it is done, Dr. Sam and Councillor Cooper will ably carry on into the next part of the program. Thank you very much for your attention. And to all the speakers, I want to give kudos for your great speeches. Thank you very much for joining us. Please enjoy this short clip.
First of all, share with you some ideas as to how I understand the ecosystem of higher education, and then secondly, the challenges that we face when it comes to knowledge production, and then thirdly, how can we face what I think are some of the pressing challenges of the 21st century when it comes to higher education. And then finally, I will share some thoughts with you about ICT, specifically with reference to my own university, what we're trying to do. When you look at the ecosystem of higher education, of course, one can talk about many things, but I'll simply single out three. One is, of course, we all know the mission of the sector in which we find ourselves. Of course, there are typically mentioned three things, but recently we've begun to talk about four areas. One, of course, is teaching and learning and producing employable graduates. Secondly, research and knowledge production. And then third, public service and engagement. And finally, as we heard from the first speaker, universities to be centers of innovation and entrepreneurship in order to promote Africa's sustainable development. Many of us lead universities or work in universities, and we know, and this is the second thing I want to briefly mention, the challenges of managing universities. Two in particular stand out. One is, of course, the diversity of constituencies that we have to deal with. Internally, you're dealing with students, staff, faculty, management, boards of trustees, university councils, and so on. And then, of course, externally, you're dealing with alumni who struggle between the internal and external, parents, governments, the private sector, civil society, other universities, international and intergovernmental agencies, and donors. And then, of course, there is the multiplicity of functions: policy making, including strategic planning, operations and services, and data mining is central in effective decision making in teaching and learning and research and development, as I'll try to demonstrate. Finally, let me just share with you what I think are some of the pressing challenges facing African higher education as we speak. I see 7 key challenges. First is, of course, one of institutional supply. While there has been rapid growth in the number of universities, from 170 in 1969 to 1,682 in 2018. Africa's universities only represent 8.9% of the world's universities, while Asia has 37%. And Africa still has the lowest enrollment ratio in the world of about 13%. North Africa is 33.75%. Sub-Saharan Africa is 8.9%. This in comparison to 37.88% for the world on average, and for the high-income economies of 77%. The second problem we all know is resource deficits, evident in insufficient and declining public funding, severe deficits of physical and electronic resources, poor maintenance of existing infrastructure, and universities, of course, suffer from overdependence on tuition fees as their core source of income to run their programs, and there is often limited diversification. Thirdly, faculty shortages. In many countries, higher education institutions suffer from shortages of qualified faculty and insufficient teaching and learning facilities. In Kenya, where I'm located, for example, only 34% of the country's faculty in the 74 universities have PhD degrees. Growing problems of rising academic fraud, including controlled cheating for dissertations and predatory journal publications, add to those challenges. Academic salaries are generally lower than for other professions, making academic careers less attractive to the best and brightest, which further reduces the faculty pipeline. Fourth are challenges of institutional governance, which are engendered by political leadership appointments and political meddling, lack of leadership development opportunities, prevalence of cultures of institutional authoritarianism and corruption, and excessive interventions by often understaffed regulatory agencies. Then, of course, there is the problem of unequal internationalization. The continent is not a major player in the lucrative international student market. More African students study abroad than foreign students study on the continent. There is also the age-old problem of intellectual dependency and what I call epistemic extraversion, rooted in the histories of colonial and neo-colonial dependency. Much of African scholarship imports and follows, sometimes blindly, analytical paradigms, perspectives, and preoccupations of scholarship in North America and Western Europe. And then finally, there is the problem or the challenge of the quality of outputs. The challenges are most evident in two crucial products of higher education, namely the quality of graduates and the quality of research. That leads me to the second part about knowledge production. Knowledge production is fundamentally molded and mediated by the unyielding demands and unpredictable dynamics of historical geography, political economy, and social ecology. The production, specifically the production, dissemination, and consumption of scholarly knowledges, including the origins, construction, and legitimation of disciplines, are conditioned by complex and sometimes contradictory, but always changing processes and practices that occur and intersect at personal, local, national, and international levels. In this, I just want to mention two key things: the dynamics of knowledge production, and then Africa's positioning in global knowledge production. In terms of knowledge production, a field that I've done considerable work, there are really 4 dynamics that influence the kinds of knowledges that are produced. First of all are the institutional contexts, the nature, structures, policies, processes, funding, and composition of knowledge-produced institutions condition the types of knowledges that are produced and legitimated. Secondly, the intellectual dynamics, the prevailing theoretical, methodological, and discursive tendencies and trends of a particular discipline, field, subject, or problem, or issue, and emerging critiques determine the contours of knowledge production. Thirdly, there are ideological dynamics. Prevailing ideological tendencies and trends influence the dynamics of knowledge production, dissemination, and consumption. And finally, individual contexts. Knowledge production reflects one's social biography, the social inscriptions of gender, race, class, nationality, ethnicity, religion, and so on. What is Africa's positioning in global knowledge production? The data is quite disheartening in some senses. With regards to research expenditure, Africa's gross domestic expenditure on R&D as a percentage of GDP averages 0.5%, compared to the world average of 1.7%, and for Asia of about 1.6%. North America, 2.7%, and the world average, as I said, 1.7%. Africa's share of global R&D is 1.3%. With regards to research productivity, Africa accounts for less than 3% of world researchers, compared to Asia with more than 42%. And our share of scholarly publications is also less than 3%, compared to about 40% for Asia. The only area Africa claims dubious distinction is in the proportion of publications with international authors. While the world average is about 25%, for Africa it's about 64%, compared to 26.1% for Asia. Thus, like our dependent economies, African scholarship suffers from epistemic extroversion. We work less with each other and more with scholars in the global north. How do we promote African research capacities in order to overcome some of these knowledge production deficits? We need to pursue what I call the 6 R's. One is, of course, resources. African governments, knowledge-producing institutions, including universities, research organizations and networks, and the potential beneficiaries of research, such as the private sector and civil society, have to increase research funding and support. The second R is rewards, establishing schemes, both monetary and non-monetary, to incentivize research productivity in higher education institutions. The third is recruitment. Research careers are not as attractive to our best and brightest, as I said earlier, young people, because to pursue an academic career in many of our countries has increasingly become a vow of poverty, given the embarrassingly low levels of remuneration for faculty in our institutions. The fourth is retooling. Faculty and researchers often lack opportunities to retool or the time to undertake research. Many are forced to spend more time not to publish or perish, but to teach or perish. Overloaded as they are with heavy teaching loads in their own institutions and adjuncted in others, to make ends meet. The fifth is relevance. There is need to balance pure and applied research. Research has to address pressing national, regional, and global challenges as identified in national visions, regional instruments such as African Union's Agenda 2063, and of course globally, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, the issue of rankings. Differentiation of institutions, as we heard this morning, is important. Some universities, the national flagships, should be designated as research intensive and predominantly be graduate institutions producing faculty for the higher education system as a whole, and of course others specializing in other areas, including teaching. The creation of the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, in 2015, a consortium of 16 research universities, is a good step in that direction. Thirdly, let me discuss again very briefly the key challenges facing higher education in this century. There's going to be what one could say the persistence of contemporary trends. 3 years ago, I published a book entitled The Transformation of Global Higher Education, 1945 to 2015, that examines changes in higher education over the past 70 years on every continent: Asia, Europe, the Americas, and of course Africa itself. I identified 5 key trends. One is, of course, massification, the growth of higher education institutions and enrollment. 2, privatization, the growth of private institutions, privatization of public institutions, and the growth of the for-profit sector in higher education. Third is what I call knowledge reorganization. Shifts in the disciplinary and interdisciplinary architecture, infrastructures, and systems of knowledge production, dissemination, and consumption. Fourth, internationalization, which has grown and engendered new modes, rationales, and practices of collaboration, competition, comparison, and commercialization. And then finally, what I call the accountability movement. Higher education institutions have been facing growing accountability demands from students, their families, the public, government, and industry. These trends will continue and likely accelerate. Massification in the global south, especially Africa, will of course intensify because of Africa's youth barrage. The restructuring and pluralization of higher education organizations, governance, systems, funding structures, pedagogical practices, and academic qualifications is also likely to last. The distinction between non-profit and for-profit, private and public institutions will continue to wane. So will the spatial and temporal confines of higher education as the provision and access become less tied to physical place and stage in life with expansion of online education and extension of lifelong learning. And all these, of course, will continue. 5 minutes, okay. But there are also going to be new trends emerging. And some of these have to do with the changes in the global economy, changes including the 4th Industrial Revolution, as well as, of course, for Africa, the demographic barrage I mentioned earlier. As we all know, 60% of the African youth are below the age of 25. And Africa is slated to have a quarter of the world's population by 2050 and 40% of the world's population by the end of the century. The key trends for the 21st century are 4 in higher education, in my view. One are the digital disruptions. Because of time, I won't say much, except to note that the digital disruptions are going to continue unraveling much of what we do in higher education in terms of the systems of teaching and learning, the systems of research, knowledge production, consumption, and so on. Secondly, is going to be the changes tied to public service. And here, there are really three areas. Again, because of time, I won't go into details, except to point out the growth of public-private partnerships is going to intensify in very complicated ways. And the issue of the social impact of education is also going to become more and more important. And finally, the issue of employability is going to become more serious than it is now because of demands from students, society, and so on. The third trend is the unbundling of the degree. Higher education has had a monopoly over certification. That monopoly is eroding, and new forms of qualifications are going to become important. And as lifelong learning intensifies, the need for micro degrees is going to become quite evident. And then finally, the need for lifelong learning is going to become more imperative. And lifelong learning will lead to changes in the ways we organize our institutions, the ways we teach, the ways in which students learn, and in fact, the stages at which learning takes place, no longer being confined to 18 to 24, but becoming a lifelong process, which will, of course, transform many of our practices. Let me just conclude in the last minute about ICT at my own institution. Again, I won't go into details, except to point out that we have been working very hard to improve and strengthen our ICT infrastructure, including, of course, developing different data centers, discovery, recovery plans, and so on. We operate 2 different internet connectivity lines. We have over 700 workstations, 8 very comprehensive computer labs, and so on. And we use ICT in all our operations. Our ERP and LMS, learning management system. We have several other systems to do with HR, to do with the library, to deal with curriculum assessment, to deal with our health services, our cafeteria system, our core curricular activities. We measure those ones also through these systems. And we have increasingly begun to use business intelligence tools, such as Tableau, to help us with proactive analytics, predictive analytics, in order to ensure we can even predict which students are going to be successful and which ones are not, and provide timely interventions. And then, of course, ICT in terms of learning and teaching and research is something we have paid a lot of attention. Our learning management system, Blackboard, enabling us, of course, to support our various modes of delivery, including flipped classrooms, blended learning, and so on. And we have increasingly begun to do research in big data. We have a mini HPC, high performance computing, to help us as we move forward. And finally, we have also been very attentive to developing partnerships with some of the leading IT companies, from Microsoft to IBM, Technobrain for East Africa, Safaricom, you name it. And this for us is important, not only for our students' opportunities for teaching and learning, but also, of course, for faculty research. These opportunities, as well as challenges, will continue confronting all of us as we move in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
and welcome to another insightful episode of CGC Show on AAU TV, and I'm your host for today, Ajibana Chudako. Today we're discussing social media marketing as a career. I know many of you out there, young graduates, really want to enter this industry, the media industry, and then blog about entertainment and all that. And today I have with me the right person, or let me say one of the credible people to talk to this issue to help you build yourself as a social media marketer. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Welcome back to CGC Show, the career guidance and counseling show on AAU TV, and I'll be your host for today, Ajibana Chudako. Please do want to follow us on all social media handles on the screen and send in your comments and questions. We'll be glad to receive them. So as I mentioned earlier, we were talking about social media marketing. You know, social media is now booming. Data and research is the whole thing of the day. So everybody wants to be online, be watched, and make some money. And we have here Mr. Zion Felix.
Yes, sir.
Who is originally Mr. Felix Adumako. You're welcome to CGC Show.
Thank you very much.
All right, Felix. You know, you've been on social media for a very long time. You know, anytime I go on YouTube, I must watch something by Felix.
Oh, God bless you.
And
I owe you $5 city.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take it after the show, you know. Yeah. But, you know, people really admire how you've taken the whole industry into. You interview at any point.
Yeah.
You know, you start with your car boot thing.
Yeah.
And it's quite wonderful. How did it start for you? Did you really want to be this kind of person now, or perhaps something just turned you to this way?
I've always wanted to be, let me say, in the limelight. I love radio, I love TV, I love acting. In fact, I'm a disappointed actor. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I wanted to be like Chris Atto. Mm-hmm. Chris was hosting rhythms on TV. I've forgotten the station, but he was hosting a TV show. He was also an actor. So I wanted to be a TV, radio personality and an actor. But Charlie, how you would do that was the question that I was always asking, how I was going to be, because sure. I wasn't a rich boy, so how I was going to enter that was a problem for me. But in JSS, I started radio, Ahinema Radio, Kumasi was a Bremen. I attended Bishop Sapon. So Prince Minka, I think he's at XYZ, he was the morning show. Yeah, XYZ morning show, Prince Minka, he was at TV Africa, now he's at. So those case programs, yeah. Case Corner. So I used to read sports there. After JSS into high school, I stopped. And then I started following entertainment because I love entertainment. Sure. I always wanted to hear a lot about celebrities and all those stuff. So after high school, Konongo my senior high school, 2011, we started 4 years. So it was 2007 to 2011, okay. 4 time. So like you know, they started 4 years time. Sure. So 2007 to 2011. So after high school, I was home. I was supposed to buy and wait and go to school that same year. Okay. But I thought they wanted to chop our money, so I didn't buy. So, you know, initially. When you complete school, you have to go the following year. Yeah. But because we went for 4 years, when you completed, you have to go that same year. Because now I was saying we 2010 and go 11, but we completed in 11, so I was supposed to go in 11. But I thought they wanted to chop my money, they gone 4, wanted to chop my money, I no buy. Okay. So I waited to 2012. So whilst waiting 11 and 12, a friend of mine, Raphael, he bought funds for Legon and went to school that same year. Sure. So I mean, he had money. He helped me to buy a laptop. And then I was also on Facebook, okay. chatting, posting funny things. And I thought, okay, let me open a blog. It was a free blog, zion-felix.blogspot.com. That one is free, so anybody can create it. Okay. It's owned by Google. So I opened it. If I'm saying everything, it's going to take all our time. So let me just summarize it. I opened it. I had love for it. Sure. So I was always copying and pasting content, sharing on Facebook. My classmates would be insulting me. You are spamming us. But I mean, as I was doing it, people had eyes. People in the industry had eyes seeing what I was doing. One of such people was Pakosi of omgghana.com. Sure. Now it's omgvoice.com. Biggest DH, he who owns it. If you're listening to a song, you hear sure. It was for same people. So Pa called me and he said, Charlie, I've seen what you're doing. You're doing great stuff. Would you want to work with us? We're going to pay you. I didn't know that money day inside itself, because me, I was just doing something that I love to do. Sure. So I said, oh, why not? So he took me on OMG Ghana. I was still running the free blog spot in OMG. So I think 2 years into the game of working with OMG, I told Pa that, Pa, I want to have my own website. So cool. So he used my 6 months salary. 6 months, no pay. So I'm like, I don't care, because I just love what I'm doing. So he used the money to create my website for me. He asked me the name I wanted, but I didn't know any name than the same Zion Felix. So I said, okay, zionfelix.com. He created a platform for me. After getting my own website, I was still with OMG Ghana, because I just told myself that I wanted them not to sack me. So I was still running my own platform. I was still with OMG Ghana. I was there, I think 2 years on. Past Charlie, your platform has become bigger. Now, you become a competitor to OMG Ghana. So it's better you go on your own, concentrate on it, and become bigger than how you are right now. So name yes, I'm a code, but I can't be with somebody forever and ever. So I left. Whilst there, I started shooting videos for myself on my YouTube channel. Yeah. So I mean, the brand was growing. Yeah. So I left Orange Ghana, and God being so good. From 2011 till now, like 9 years, right? Wow, macho. Yeah, really. From 11 to now, we're still doing the game, and we'll still be in it forever and ever. Sure.
What happened to your brand when you were starting? Where from? You were Felix Adomakuma.
Adomakuma Felix.
So where from the Zion?
When I went to school, Form 1 SS, Konongo Senior High School, my name was Black Bongo. Black Bongo because Fresh Trouble, they used to call Samini Bongo in Fresh Trouble. Wow, Fresh Trouble Pano. And I love, let me say I loved then. I loved Samini Pa because of his bass.
You love it now?
I still love Samini, but not like first. So I used to call myself Black Bongo. Okay. So when I went to high school, I was called Black Bongo. I was like, that name. So there's this guy called Zion. He's a Mexican. Only Ekonyanyum. I love the way she moved. So that guy is so handsome. So I said, okay, the name is Zion. And I love the song too. I love the song. So I went to church midterm. From when I'm called school, I'm called midterm. I went to church, and our pastor also preached. And then he said Zion. I was like, okay, Zion is handsome. Zion is in the Bible. So let me just take the name Zion, add it to my name to get like a unique name. Like nowhere on this planet you get Zion Felix. Sure. There's, if like Google Zion Felix, me people will come anywhere Zion Felix. So I just took it myself. Zion is in the Bible. If I get to the ghetto, I will dada them that Zion Rasta. If I get to church, I'll see that Zion is in the Bible. If I get to music, I see that Zion is a musician. So I mean, anywhere be a Zion day. So that's how come I got the name Zion Felix. Not any weird idea. Yeah.
So tell us what difference you made when you entered social media marketing. What new things did you bring on board that perhaps nobody had ever done before?
Me, I didn't know. People are saying it. Saying me have changed the face. Then they have made blogging more interesting. Have made people understand that Charlie, you can still be a blogger and make it. So I think the passion has made me change a lot of things in the game. I've made people find interest in the blogging game. Yes. I've made people love it. I've made people realize that you can be a blogger and actually make money. Can be a blogger and actually live a comfortable life. Can be a blogger and actually be happy with what you are doing. So I think these are some of the things that I think I've changed in the game. Now people are saying that we should add blogging to careers that if you're a kid and you want to grow up, you would want to be. First is to be doctor. I want to be a nurse. I want to be a lawyer. But people are saying, say, Charlie, now blogging for add to the case. Like, they want to be a blogger in future. Because it is really good. It's so good. Like the way people want to be like you, people want to be like Kwame Sefakai, people want to be like other people in the media game. Somebody to also say, I want to be like Ami Adebra, I want to be like Zion Felix, I want to be like Chris Vicente and other bloggers, because Charlie, now the thing is the ish now.
Someone would say perhaps Zion had a good educational background in media studies and perhaps a media guru. what did you study?
Congo Medicine High School, I was a business student.
Okay.
Accounting, accounts, I love accounts, Papa. EMAS and IBM. Now they call it BM.
All right.
It used to be Introduction to Business Management, but now they say it's Business Management.
Exactly.
And Legon, they gave me 1100. I was accounts, political science, and information studies. Level 200, I dropped accounts because I love accounts though, but because I was a blogger, I was doing radio as well. Not many time, and accounts was like you need time for accounts. So I dropped accounts. I did political science and information studies. I did that in 200 and 300. And 400, I single majored in information studies. I've never been to any media school. I've never worked with any media person. Me growing up, many celebrity be an anteda, many radio presenter be an anteda, many journalists be an anteda. So this thing, I just entered it myself. I just coached myself. Maybe I say when I went to OMG Ghana, no, it's their platform, so they will teach you certain things, small things to do. But I've never been under any person. I've never been to IBM and J. I've never been to GIJ. IBM and J is in Kumasi. It's a media school. I've never been to any media school. It's been me, myself, learning on the job. Nobody has been my mentor. I wanted to be like Chris Atto, but when I entered into blogging, I mean, Chris is not even a blogger. Chris, when I entered, was an actor, like was a full-time actor. He had stopped TV. So I wouldn't say I was here, I learned this. No, it's me, myself, and I. Not that I'm bragging, but that is reality. Nobody has taught me anything. Maybe OMG for now, they were teaching me something small. But nobody was my mentor. Nobody has been my mentor. As and now, I'm still doing things on my own.
Let's look at how you are going about with news.
Yeah.
Now, mostly when you put out the video on YouTube or something, it should be catchy.
Yeah.
Let's look at how you strike the balance. You could have been any kind of blogger. You could have been educational blogger, any kind. But why did you choose to do entertainment?
Because I followed my passion. I love entertainment. I still love. I'm sure I'll continue to love till that can come. You know, if you love something, you go all out for it. You do and do it so well. So because of the passion that I have for entertainment, I know that if I'm doing it, no matter where the content day, I'll try and go for it. I was in Cape Coast on Friday. I woke up 4 o'clock, 6 a.m. I set off. I finished everything that I was doing around 4 o'clock. I came. The people that I went to, the mindset, they didn't give it to me. But because I wanted to go and get the information, I sat down, I analyzed, say, I didn't make it will help me, to help my brand. It will give me content. It will make people happy. So why don't I go for it? So I went for it. I drove myself, went to Cape, and I came back without getting money from it. But because I love it. If you're funding money, I won't get any money from it, I won't go. But because I have passion for it, I at times fly to Kumasi to go and do just interviews and come. I have love for what I'm doing. So had it been probably, let's say, education, maybe my interest might not be in it. I won't kill myself to do it. I don't sleep. I don't sleep. I came from Cape early in the morning. I had to wake up, go do some runs on Saturday. And in the evening, I think Saturday evening or so, my girl, Nakiat, that's young poet, she was coming from UK.
She returned, yeah.
Yeah.
You met her?
I met her at the airport. I went to drop her at home. I got to my house like 12. I had to sit down and edit her video. Around 2 a.m., I slept around 2 a.m. I had to wake up in the morning, upload the video before going to church. If you don't have passion if you do all these things, if you don't have passion, you can't do it. I don't sleep.
Must you follow every celebrity everywhere they go to get content for?
If they need me, if I need them, I'll do it. If I have to get the content, if the content is very, very important, I'll do it.
Many say bloggers lie. That is your cross.
You don't lie.
You lie a lot. So people don't want to be in that career because I don't want to be a liar. What would you say to that?
Bloggers don't lie. I usually say that when the story hits the person, and the person thinks that it's going to dent his or her image, then he or she come out and say that we lied on him. I've had several calls on things that people said that they've come out to say that I didn't say it. When you ask them, what did you say? They'll summarize it, and then what you reported is what they actually said. Or like the person will say this, you report it like that. Because it is too harsh, the person will come back and say that, oh, I didn't say that. Oh, what did he say? The person will go and come and say what you reported. I'm like,
have you had one before? Have you had an instance? Share with us one instance you had to save yourself.
I don't remember right now. But like, not just me, a lot of people. That is, I mean, most of the celebrities come out to deny publication because it hits them hard. They weren't expecting it. So they'll come out and say, oh, I didn't say it or it didn't happen. Most of them do not expect such a thing to come out, but it eventually comes out. So not like we lie. There's no way that somebody can sit down and frame a story and it will sink so well. No, you know, we don't have any bad mind about anybody. If I put out that bad publication, I won't earn $1 million out of it. So nobody sits down and says that let me disgrace this particular person. I don't do that. And then even of late, most of the stories that I put out are interviews that I've done or things that I am there, so that nobody come and say that I didn't say it. So if you didn't say it, I mean, the video is there. You just play the video for you to hear it yourself. All that one there.
All right, they've just joined us. It's CGC show on AU TV, and we're with the man, the blogging star. He is Felix. If you go on YouTube, you'll find him there. And we're talking about social media marketing as a career. And believe me, you know, it's all about branding and the message, the content, okay? We'll go to this pause and come back. We'll be asking him, what is the dream